Good afternoon to all the participants and to the speaker. Welcome to the afternoon session of FDP program phase 1 sponsored by AICTE. So today we have Dr. Padma Priya as the speaker for this session. She is a principal associate in the pharmaceutical life science practice group at Khurana and Khurana. She has an extensive experience in intellectual property matters related to patents, including management of patent life cycle, drafting, prosecution, and litigation. Her clients include industry and academia that operate in the pharmaceutical and life science space, and her practice currently focuses on all aspects of patent prosecution at India and abroad. Her practice technologies include, for example, plant biotechnology, herbal technology, genomics and diagnostic assay, biomedical devices, microbial technology, immunotechnology, nanotechnology, and food technology. Prior to joining Khurana and Khurana, Dr. Priya was associated with leading intellectual property firms based at Delhi and Chennai. She has also had a brief stint as an independent practitioner assisting inventors from the preliminary stages up until tangible protection of their intellectual property, which was achieved. Ma'am, on behalf of the staff, student, management of the Oxford College of Engineering, I, Salma, take this privilege to welcome you to this FDP program, and we are happy that you have accepted as our invitation for being a speaker. Ma'am, it's a welcome from our end, and it is over to you to start with the session.
Thank you very much, Salma, for the kind words, and good afternoon to one and all. My sincere thanks to the Oxford College of Engineering and the organizers, principal and management, AICTE and KSCST for allowing me to be a part of this program on bio-innovation, patenting, and entrepreneurship opportunities in biotechnology for sustainable environment. I have been allotted this topic and I have taken it up with both the hands gratefully. Patent drafting of biotech inventions, techniques for biotechnology inventions. What exactly? Probably in the last week or so, and this is a 2-week program, and I understand all throughout the 2 weeks we would have been listening to the word patent, intellectual property, a techno-legal document. Exactly what is a patent? A patent is a techno-legal document, but it is more than that. It is an amalgamation of your scientific thoughts and bringing it into a tangible manifestation and bringing you economic returns. So for doing that, you need to have some legal rights so that wherever you go around, you are able to use the help of legal rights and get your economic benefits. So in essence, a patent document helps provide a disclosure of the invention to the public, so that when these rights expire after a set period, usually for patents it's 20 years in India, the general public is able to work the invention. It also helps in identifying where, if there is a legal aspect, a connotation to it, it is that it helps identify the subject matter, and it helps identify and give a notice of function to the public as to what exactly and exclusively belongs to the patentee. So in this document, you get to see the technical aspects of the invention, and you also get to know where exactly the legal rights for the patentee is afforded by the government. So once an inventor has actually done his piece of research and he has some information in his hands, he begins to wonder, how do I go about getting some patent rights, or how do I safeguard my rights in this invention? And the next step is, how do I get some economic benefit out of these rights that I have protected, I have obtained? So that is the first question that an inventor, which I have come across often, is perplexed by. And then the basic steps would involve you have an information on your research or on your scientific endeavors in your hand, and then you actually take the first step of going in and reviewing how this information would stand against the present state of art. And here is where your prior art searches help you in understanding, you and your patent attorney or your legal professional, whoever is there, or your facilitator, your IPR facilitator, they help you understand and navigate as to the invention or the information on this scientific information that you have in hand, how it would help you obtain some monopoly, and to what extent it could help you, and where exactly your invention lies is all the aspects that would happen, that would come out in this stage. And once you have this information on what you have in hand, how good it is, and how far you can take it, you can make an informed view. You can make a very good decision on whether you need a patent protection and how to go about it and whether it would be worthwhile. So once you cross this step of having evaluated what's in your hand and you understand, and your patent professional helps you out and says, yes, you do have an invention in hand, and then he has also gone about, he's done a prior art search for your for this information in your hand, and then he gives it a form of an invention. And how does that come about? That comes about when actually the distinct aspects of those invention are charted out in. Now, what are the distinct aspects that your information should have, which ultimately results in being an invention is, it should be novel, it should be inventive, it should have industrial applicability, it does not fall under any of the exclusions set by the government for patentability, and a set of fewer additional disclosures are required for it to form a proper invention. We will go by each of these categories in the following slides, one by one, to understand how that information in your hand transforms into an invention and how that invention transforms into a patent. Come across novelty. These are the sacred pillars, the three pillars for any patent document is novelty, inventive step, and industrial applicability. So the first three which I jotted down. So novelty is basically that your invention or your, basically in India, it is the product or a process which is recognized as an invention. So once the scientific information that you have in hand falls under either of these categories, that is, it's a product or it's a process, then it crosses the first step of what exactly it comes under as a category of invention. Then secondly, we go on to how good is this invention going to stand the test of the patentability for a patent. So first one that comes across is novelty. Novelty in a simplest sense would be that your invention in hand should not be a mirror image of anything in the prior art. What is a prior art? Prior art is anything right now available in the public domain in the form of publications, in the form of use, in the form of traditional knowledge, or anything. Anybody knows about it in the domain, in the public, is a public knowledge, then it is not novel. So if your product or a process is not a mirror image of whatever is now existing outside, it does stand the test of novelty. So usually we call it also by another term as anticipation. So basically, it's not anticipated by the prior art. It does not form a part of the prior art, or that it has not entered into the public domain. There is an example here wherein supposing you have a polynucleotide sequence and the activity or the function of that sequence was not known before. But now that you have taken a small portion of that huge sequence and then you have found something, or you have what should I say? We have probably not even given right now. You have not given any annotated it for any particular function. Then probably it would be bang outright part of novelty. It would not stand the test of novelty. It would be considered as anticipated. And then there is a bit of complexity attached to the example that I have given you, for the simple reason that if the function was not determined and now you come up with a function and you show specific results, then the second level of assessment of inventive step also comes. But just let's start with simple examples, and we can always say that if it has an exact sequence, a match of sequences with the prior art, then you can be sure that an objection on anticipation or novelty would definitely pop up. But yes, as a patent professional, as your experienced agents who guide you through this process, they would be able to help out sort of such problems. But in the first step, if you are aware that there is an exact sequence match, and it is preferable to be aware that there could be an anticipation objection. The second step that an inventor has to cross is the inventive step. The inventive step is a mandatory requirement, and this is where the inventiveness of an inventor is acknowledged by the examining authority. So there are a couple of requirements set forth by the government here. One is that the invention should have a technical advancement over the existing knowledge. In India, we also have the provision of showing economic significance. Probably it's a cheaper method, less time, less economic drain on the resources. Or if one is able to show both these together, both they are acknowledged as inventive step. The second step actually is also to say that the invention should be unobvious or non-obvious. So how do you evaluate obviousness? Obviousness is always evaluated against the prior art, whatever is available in the public domain. So generally it is done against prior publications. Either it could be non-patent literatures, that is scientific literatures, technical abstracts, or it is patent literatures, wherein the claims, the disclosure, every part of the patent is taken through or looked into, and just to see if this invention stands obvious to the present invention. Now out here I have an example wherein you see that supposing the invention is a recombinant DNA sequence, it has a specific sequence ID, and it encodes a human interferon alpha-2 polypeptide, which exhibits an antiviral activity. And the closest prior art also is a nucleic acid sequence of a minor variation, but it encodes the human interferon alpha-1 polypeptide. But there is a distinct difference in that the activity, the antiviral activity of the present invention is significantly high. It is so significant that it could not have been a subject or a matter which would have been obvious to a person skilled in the art. So would a person skilled in the art merely have judged or even assumed that that minor variation in that nucleotide sequence would result in an antiviral activity. Certainly not in biotech realms, because any modifications, any differences certainly require extensive experimental backups, experimental time spent on evaluating and validating those researches, and thus the significance, the technical advancement for this invention has been held, and it's necessary that the experimental data always be presented to back up whatever advancement is being revealed by the inventor. The third pillar for an invention would be industrial applicability. This is not very often come across when we do prosecution or we do drafting, but it is a very vital point for the reason that if it is not capable of being made or used in an industry, the invention in hand, then it is liable to be revoked even if a patent is granted. Now, supposing I have an example here that I just discover and try a gene sequence, and then I try to get a patent on it. And if I do not give a disclosure on its function, so there is no applicability, there is no industrial applicability attached to it. So for those reasons, it is very essential that there be a disclosure on the usefulness and industrial applicability of an invention in a very clear and distinct manner. It should be credible, and it should the examples in the specification should actually substantiate this usefulness. So when we have an invention in hand, though our patent attorneys or our agents or our professionals or the inventors themselves would desire that I do have a small invention in hand, but I would like to get a broader protection. This is where the art and science comes in, that the use should also, in the name of having a broad protection, one does not have disclose any speculative uses of the invention without backing up with any experimental data, or even finding a reasonable thread as to whether the present invention could work in those domains. So unless you have something substantial in your hand, please do not disclose or claim any such speculation, do not make any such speculations on uses of the invention. Now that we also have the invention in hand, and we have also looked into the novelty aspects, the inventive step aspects, the industrial aspects, there is another very important aspect that has to be evaluated even before we set a pen to the paper in the name of drafting the invention. So the information that you have provided to your professional, or probably you have done it at your own end, you have done a prior art search, and you have found out that yes, your invention is novel. Yes, your invention has an inventive step in view of the prior arts, the closest prior arts. And yes, your invention is useful. There is this patentability exclusions which looms large, and this has to be specifically looked into and taken seriously before one starts drafting the invention. Because patents are territorial in nature, and every government has, under the TRIPS agreement, some leeway as to adopting some exceptions as to what it would consider inventions. For the Indian jurisdiction, under the Indian statute, we have some inventions which do fall under the category of a new product or a process, as it has been defined in inventions, but still they will not be considered as patentable inventions for myriad reasons. So these exceptions are also called non-patentable inventions, and they fall under Section 3 of the Indian Patents Act, and they extend from the subsections A to P, and they cover most of the RENs. But here I have just brought out those relevant sections which mostly fall under biotech inventions. So this is just a run through because I understand probably in the prior sessions, you may have been exposed and introduced to these patent exclusions, but still if one is to sit and draft, then it would be very much important to see and evaluate that the invention does not fall under any of these exclusion criteria. It's not just the invention, it is also the inventive concept, that is the scientific, the technical feature which one considers as an inventiveness of the present invention, which is the distinguishing feature from the prior art. That feature should not be falling under any of these exclusion criteria. So it is always recommended that one goes carefully through these exclusions and then makes an informed decision and then starts the process of drafting. So first, one of the first ones is patentability exclusions under Section 3B. Basically, inventions which are contrary to the public order morality and they cause harm to the environment or the human life or animal or plant life, basically life on the planet, fall under these sections. And if one is to see, then inventions, from my experience, I have seen that inventions related to tobacco in any form, stem cells, germ lines, embryonic cells, terminator genes long ago, have drawn heavy scrutiny under this section, and it is very tough to get inventions of these sort granted under the Indian Patents Act. In fact, in a very strange case, one might say that one of the inventions was related to agriculture biotechnology, wherein the inventor had merely used a tobacco mosaic virus plasmid for his replication aspects. And merely because the word tobacco was there during the prosecution stage, the examiner said, no, ma'am, this is related to tobacco, so we will not give. So yeah, sometimes it's absurd, but then it's not their fault also, because they just go in and they see this, they have been told don't grant patents, so tobacco is harmful for health, and then it becomes a duty of the drafter to ensure that if such terms do appear in the draft, make sure that you have clarified that there is not, it has got nothing to do with tobacco, but merely it's a tool. Second, we have Section 3C, which is also very important for biotech inventions, because anything which is isolated or discovered from nature, any living thing, non-living thing, or scientific principles or abstract theory, they are not allowed under this section. So often, isolated products from nature, they are not allowed. But a process of isolation, yes, if it involves, if it passes all the tests of novelty, inventive step, and other things, yes, it would definitely be considered. So you don't need to panic saying that, yeah, it does fall under 3C. There are some tips where we can overcome these objections. We could probably in your research stage itself, you could consider doing some modifications, alterations, deletions, show some comparative data with that which is existing in nature, so that you can also provide technical advancement. And probably when we actually start the process of drafting, you could avoid terms such as isolated, natural, discovery, and all those in the claims and the specification, to avoid any frivolous objections or any other problems anytime later during prosecution. We come over to section 3D. Mostly this section carries heavy weight in pharma sector and chemical sectors. But yeah, we often do see them in biotech also. But because in pharma and chemistry, it is more of therapeutic drugs and compounds, they demand therapeutic efficacy. But in case a 3D has been raised, and you can also ensure that whatever useful feature or a technical feature that the present invention is being emphasized about or being substantiated about, you have to show examples to prove that feature or that prove that efficacy. So it is necessary that one shows that improved property or efficacy of the modified substance in compared to that which probably when prior art search has been done and the unmodified substance or the closest substance is known to the researcher. Just have such data in hand. Even if you do not want to give such data at the time of drafting the application, please ensure that you have such comparative data in hand, which would definitely help during prosecution. I have an example here that there is a crystal structure of a therapeutic polypeptide invention. And obviously, if such an invention were to be pursued, they would have to show, and that because it's a therapeutic polypeptide, they have to show significant therapeutic efficacy over the known form of the polypeptide. Here it's the amorphous form. So it is a suggestion that before you actually start drafting, you may have given information on your research for your prior art search, but once you get your prior art done, there is a set of other activities which an inventor has to undertake, probably prepare all comparative data or prepare more additional experimental data for proving these efficacies or moving out of these exclusion criteria. The other one is section 3E, and this is probably the most highly quoted section for exclusions when it's a composition claim or any claim wherein more than one active ingredient is present. And if yours is a composition product, it's a herbal product or any product that you have in hand, ensure that even if you are to claim it in the form of a composition, then there is a synergistic effect amongst all the components which is there in your hand. Such data is there in your hand so that you can move forward with ease. We also have the section 3H, which actually forbids any inventions which pertain to methods of agriculture and horticulture. I've just listed out some of the methods which fall under this section: conventional methods, intercropping methods, application of pesticides, fertilizers, hormones, use of earthworms, mulch, etc. for improving soil fertility. Even though it may be a process invention, it will not be allowed under section 3H. Sometimes what happens is we do recombinant technology, we use agribiotech or such biotech procedures. We come up with new modified plants or anything, and we do claim such new processes. But in the end, in the last step, there might be a tendency to say that, yes, finally I allow the modified seedlings to grow, or finally I sow these modified materials or cultures to grow. So it is those steps which are to be avoided in a process claim or when you're drafting. So because therein it might draw in objections from the examiner, and probably in your disclosure you could just mention it But then when you come over to the claims aspect, just bear in mind that those portions of your research need not be reflected in the document. Coming over to section 3I, one of the most popular sections, because it is usually popular in the sense that method of treatment is not allowed in India. And so any such methods which fall under the categories listed, like medicinal, surgical, curative, prophylactic, diagnostic, therapeutic, or anything, for human beings are not allowed. But it is vital to know that what is allowed. So probably, not probably, applications for cosmetic purposes, yes, they are allowed. Diagnostic instruments, apparatuses, manufacture of prostheses, taking measurements on the human body for the manufacture of prostheses, yes, all such inventions falling under this category are allowed. It's good even if your invention is some therapeutic product. It is still recommended that when you are about to draft your specification, avoid using terms such as administration, dosage regimen, doses, or dosages, both in the specification and the claims, and you restrict it only to the product or the process per se, rather than wandering off to these fields, because they may only result in a mere disclosure which may not give you enough legal protection in the form of rights or claims. Coming over to section 3J, it forbids patenting of plants, animals in whole or in any parts other than microorganisms. That means although it does, and essentially biological processes. So although it does, by mere reading this section, it might seem that microorganisms are allowed. One has to keep in mind that all microorganisms directly isolated from nature will not be allowed, as they may be objected under the previously seen section 3C. So here it means that modified microorganisms are patentable. So prokaryotic cells would be patentable. Avoid claiming anything which falls under this plants and animals in whole or any parts, such as cell lines, tissues, eukaryotic cells, or any parts such as those obtained by genetic processes. And avoid claiming essentially biological processes in your process step, which such as growing the recombinant microorganism in a culture medium or so forth. Coming over to exclusions under section 3K. This section excludes mathematical methods, business methods, computer programs as such per se, and algorithms. We have often seen that inventions involving bioinformatics, immunoinformatics, drug designing, biomedical devices which are automated are often draw objections under this section. But because of the recent decisions from the high courts and the IPAB, it is now more clear that computer related inventions are allowed, provided that they do not claim the computer programs per se, and if it is linked to show that there is a technical effect of the invention and that there is a technical advancement and contribution of the invention over the existing art as it is required for all the other sections, then definitely such inventions are patentable. There was recently a patent case granted by the IPO wherein it was an automated device, a biomedical device, and the device was also novel and new. It did have an inventive step, but then a good chunk of it also involved a computer programming and an algorithm done by the inventor himself. So though that aspect was not covered because of its exclusion criteria under 3K, there was one, the claim did recite this feature wherein it says that at least one processor was operatively coupled with a memory. So there are ways to move around any exclusions, provided you know and you understand what is to be shown, what is to be highlighted, what are the features of your invention in view of these exclusions, which should be highlighted and supported with your technical experiments. We come under section 3P, which is traditional knowledge and knowledge related inventions. And this this objection is often seen for herbal plants and such compositions comprising any herbs or plants as such. And it would be recommended that even if a prior art search has been done and if herbs are there in play in your invention, they could be an easier way, like searching on a traditional knowledge database library of the CSIR, which is available, at least for a preliminary search, if not for an extensive search. And it's good to know if there are any such knowledge existing in the public domain before you start working on patenting such inventions. So it's recommended that the distinctiveness and differences between the prior art in terms of the active ingredient combinations or the quantities of each of the components or the herbal plant parts and show the result significant differences in efficacy, and then proceed on drafting your patent. Other than these exclusions, it is recommended that if an invention falls under the biotech domain, there are some additional requirements which are to be met, and it's best to have them in hand before even starting the drafting procedure, or at least during the drafting procedure. So there is a mandatory requirement of deposition of biological materials in case the biological material is not defined exactly or properly, such that a person who is in the same field of art may find it very difficult to work the invention. If it's a gene sequence and you have pinpointed exact positions of mutations or modifications, preferably, yes, they would be considered as definite, and it is preferable to deposit such materials if possible, but then it would not be, but if the mutations have been clearly defined, you can still move out of this requirement. But in case it's a modified microorganism and the modifications have not been disclosed in a very proper and concrete manner, it is advisable that such materials be deposited with the IDA. In India, we do have two IDAs right now, one based in Chandigarh and one based in Pune. And the critical thing here is that such deposits should have been made on or before the date of filing the application. Secondly, there is a mandatory requirement of disclosing the source and the geographical origin of the biological resource which is used in the invention. So the source is basically the plant or the part of the plant, and the geographical origin is the physical address or the location from where such biological resource has been obtained. There is also a requirement of an approval from the National Biodiversity Authority for any invention arising out of research or information on biological resources obtained from India. If your resource has not been obtained from India, you are still mandated to at least give you would be asked to give the source and geographical origin of your biological resource in this complete specification itself. Finally, if your invention does have sequence IDs, then it is advisable to have these sequences in a searchable text format, preferably in a FASTA format for the examiner to search the sequences. And if you are to generate such sequences and you have them modified, please ensure to list them as artificial or synthetic so that you do not draw any objections under 3C stating that it is drawn from a natural source. So these are some of the few things that have to be looked into, seen into, and given attention to before starting the drafting procedure. Now that you have everything in hand, you have gone through the novelty aspect, inventive step, applicability, industrial applicability, we have the patentability exclusions, and we have all the additional documents, disclosures, everything has been set and everything is in play. There is a strategic decision to be made. What do I file? How do I file? Where do I file? The first thing is, what do I file? Because the patent office does give us an option of filing a small disclosure or the complete disclosure of your invention. So first thing is it's also called as the provisional specification and the complete specification. The provisional specification actually helps us secure a priority date for the application. It is easier to prepare because you just need to give a disclosure of the invention. And you also get time for, you need not provide claims in your provisional specification. So you get adequate time for finalizing the scope of the invention. That is what all you would consider as your invention and what you need your rights for. You get a period of 1 year, that is 12 months, to finally submit a complete specification once a provisional specification has been filed. You also can utilize this time for getting your collaborations done in the form of economic ventures, or for assessing the commercial viability of your invention and what would be the market, your marketability of your invention. And there's also another option of filing multiple provisional applications. Probably you have been researching more, you have got an additional feature, you would prefer to disclose it. And so you can file more than one provisional application. And then finally, after the period of 12 months of the first provisional application, within 12 months, or exactly 12 months later, you have to file the complete specification and you can add in all the details or disclosures that you have made in the subsequent provisional applications. But if you were to go ahead, you feel that you have all the data in hand and you feel that you are ready to file your invention, then you could opt for filing the complete specification, wherein you clearly define the claims, that is the scope of protection is clearly defined. And then this complete specification saves time and money. You need not wait for those 12 months. And in fact, if you also combine it with early publications and early examination sort of other provisions afforded by the patent office, you could speed up the processing of your patent application and the grant of your patent. So once you have made a strategic decision of filing a provisional application or a complete application, then comes the requirement of what to draft. What to draft? Drafting is nothing but disclosing your invention to the public, if stated in simple terms. But what are the legal requirements and how was it set? So it's a long ago, a century ago or 2 centuries ago, there was a decision given by the Supreme Court of the United States of America, wherein these are the 3 basic features which has not changed at all when one is to view what the current scenario is in the realm of patents and the disclosure. So basically, the government needs to know what is being granted. And because it's a quid pro quo system wherein the inventor discloses what he is giving to the public and so demands rights from the government to safeguard his invention for a set period of time, the government requires to know what is granted and what will become public property once the term of monopoly expires. It also serves the purpose of helping those people who have license to use the invention to, without relying on some other literature, knowledge, or people, to even just take up this patent document, understand it, and make or construct or use the invention without any further experimentations from on their part. It also serves the notice of function to other people in the field as to what exactly the inventor has claimed for protection and what is free to be used so that he can use this invention without the fear of infringement. So for these reasons, it is vital that the description of the invention be provided in very clear terms. So if one were to say this, we use the term specification, and specification is nothing but the written disclosure. So it's often said that specifications teach, because as per our agreement in the TRIPS agreement, the invention must be disclosed in a manner that is sufficiently clear, complete, such that a person skilled in the art, in the relevant art, can work the invention. In India, it is mandatory to disclose fully and particularly all the features that constitute the invention. Now, it should be such that an average, in India, we have defined it that a person of average skill and average knowledge should be able to perform the invention. By just relying on the document, one should be able to understand. If it's a pharma student, he should be able to understand that in that specific patent, okay, there is a procedure given for preparing the compound, the therapeutic drug, and if he were to rely on all the parameters disclosed therein, he can come up with the drug. So it provides the context for interpreting the claims in the final section of the patent. So if one were to understand the patent document, the specification provides a written disclosure. Basically, it describes what the invention is. And then it also says that of this invention, I am claiming this carved out portion. So that is why it provides a context for interpreting in there as to what exactly the claims or what exactly the scope of the claims would be. So where specifications teach, the claims claim. So it's not necessary that the disclosure and the claims be the same, but they are mutually supportive. So here we have to understand that I may disclose everything for rendering the invention clear and understandable, but only if I list it in the claims at the end. That is the only portion which would be considered for the legal aspects. So a disclosure which does not claim whatever has been disclosed becomes a part of the public domain and goes off to the public freely. And the person can use such disclosure without the concern of infringing a patent. So that is why it requires, one should be very careful when you understand that what you have disclosed and what you have claimed are not contradicting or each other, or rather they should actually be supporting each other, and you don't miss out anything when you actually claim your invention. So what is it? There are a set requirements, and what are the requirements as per the Indian Patents Act? for a complete specification. So for a complete specification, you need to fully describe the invention, its method of use, and the method by which it is performed. It's also, you have to disclose the best method of performing the invention for which we are entitled to claim protection. So if you are claiming a process, ensure that you have defined the process with examples in your specification. You have to clearly define the scope of the invention in the claims section, which appears at the end of the specification. Ensure that a reference to the deposit of the biological material is made in the complete specification, and ensure that the source and geographical origin of the biological material which has been used in the invention is clearly mentioned in the complete specification. How we go about drafting a specification, and as per the Indian requirements, the complete specification and the provisional specification are all submitted in Form 2. So it starts as Form 2, wherein the first page contains information on the title, the name, address, and nationality, and then it contains the preamble to the description. There is a minor difference in the preamble for a provisional specification, which merely states that it describes the invention, whereas for that of a complete specification, you particularly state that it describes the invention and the manner in which it is to be performed. That sets the tone for the complete specification, which has numerous sections. And these sections start from the title, the field, the background, the objective, the summary, the description, the detailed description, sequence listing, claims, drawings, and abstract. In fact, it's more like a research thesis where you have a set of sections, and you know that even if the thesis is 400 pages or so, you know that in which section what you are going to find. The patent document is not so different. That also has a set section, and in fact, a scientific person from a background of science would definitely find it very easy to understand and study a patent document, provided he understands what are the set sections. So what exactly the title of the invention is basically you need to keep it within 15 words, and it should indicate the subject matter of the invention. If it's a product, mention the product. If it's a process for preparing XXX, please mention it as such. Don't keep it very fanciful. Don't use words or terms which are very ambiguous. So just keep it clear, searchable, and sometimes people might not want to keep it so searchable also, but then that is basically an evolved level of complexity. So let's not dwell into that. But ideally, it should be brief, free of fancy expressions, and clear. You have a field of invention, and basically it's a general statement that indicates in brief the broad area or the technical field. It is the field of invention which is usually looked into for classifying your invention for your further examination processes by the patent office, and also for all other indexing purposes. And sometimes people do mention advantages of the invention under this section, but it's optional because that can also be provided in the further coming sections. And sometimes industrial applicability of the invention, or basically it says the use of this invention for XXX purpose, is also listed under this section. The background of the invention, it sets the tone as to why the inventor started working on this invention. So it's also drafted for the examiner to understand what the prior art would be and how he should view this invention. So in a sense, it's best to keep the background of the invention short, but with some relevancy to the present invention, so that you bring out all the disadvantages or all the aspects, all the pain points which are now existing in the state of the art, and what would have actually prompted the inventor to come up with the present invention. So just one of the important things is that you have to remember that anything that is mentioned in the background of the invention can be considered as admitted prior art. That is, it's been known. So it could be considered as a prior art at the time of prosecution of this application. So please ensure that you do not write anything about the present invention in hand when the background of the invention is being written. So do not discuss your actual invention that is about to be patented under this section. Just list only the drawbacks of the prior arts or the state of the art or anything that is missing in the art that you're trying to fill in the gap. Objectives of the invention. Usually this is an optional section and it's sometimes clubbed with a detailed description. But it's also good to have this section for the simple reason that we have often seen that during defending the application under examination, it helps support the inventive step arguments because it shows that the inventor was already aware of the problems in the prior art, and so he set out for this invention with a set objectives that were to be achieved, and his invention was successful in achieving such objectives. So there could be corresponding solutions which you might write, though not in clear terms. In a holistic view, you give what are the solutions, and then your invention provides those solutions in a detailed manner under detailed description. Here comes the summary of the invention. Please don't get misled by the word summary, because it's not summary of, it's not just a summary of the invention, but it is summary of the scope or the claims that you are about to claim as a patentee, right? You could give a summary of the invention, but then it is distinct because the abstract serves that purpose of what exactly gives a brief gist of the invention. Here it is that basically the independent claims are summarized in a manner which says that in one aspect of the invention, and then you list out this independent claim. Probably it's for a product. So you just say that in one aspect of the invention, in one aspect, the present invention provides a product or discusses, gives a product, provides a product for so and so X. So it sets the distinguishing features of the invention for which a protection is desired and summarizes the scope of the invention which is being claimed. So it's the summary is ideally it is intended to declare different aspects of the invention. So probably you could be claiming a product, you could be claiming a composition of that product, you could be claiming a process of preparing that product, and these are the different aspects of your invention, and they should all be there present in your summary, right? So the summary is meant to discuss the invention, that is the claims, rather than the disclosure as a whole. We come over to description of the drawings. It's self-explanatory, as we do in all our research articles. We provide legends, we provide reference to figures. The patent is no different. You need to do the same. The only thing is you list all your drawings under this section and you make reference to whatever it is in your further detailed description. So especially in biotech inventions, drawings play a major role because most of the times we have seen examiners rely on drawings to understand where exactly what insertions, modifications have been done, especially in case of plasmids, cloning vectors, and genetic transfers, or understanding the flow of flow charts are also allowed. So understanding the flow of the process of the biotech process for recombination or any such things. So Drawings should be given attention to whenever and wherever possible, and please give good amount of drawings to understand the invention. We come over to the detailed description of the invention. There are actually two parts. Basically, one where you have a general explanation of the invention and how to practice it. And then you have the example section, wherein you give a specific example of the invention and how to practice the invention. So the invention should be adequately and accurately described, and it is in the specific examples that the technical advancement of the invention is best judged by the examiner. So it is a detailed description wherein the examiner would look in for your enablement and best mode examples, requirement of a written description, which is to be fulfilled by the inventor or the patentee. We come over to the detailed description, the general explanation. Here you have to explain your invention in the broadest sense, such that you understand and show that you have a broad view of the elements of your invention and the scope of how far you're going to claim your territory in the invention. And usually what you may come across patent documents wherein it says in an embodiment XXX is defined, in another embodiment XXX is defined. Embodiments are nothing but the different features or the different aspects of how an invention could be envisaged. So if you have you have a broad invention, a product, and then you have various substitutions for the products. So those could be clearly defined as embodiments of your invention. Whereas the process will become the aspects of your invention. These are the different embodiments. The embodiment is providing a body or a sheath to the inventor concept of your invention. So what happens is you provide your invention in numerous embodiments so that they form a support at this stage of prosecution in case, in the event your claims are considered to be very not passing the inventive step because of a very close prior art. If you have another embodiment which actually defines your invention in another facet, you may take the support of those embodiments and make adjustments to your claims, amend your claims in such a manner that your claim is well supported by your description. One of the important things we have to understand is that please define all the key terms. They may be well known in your scientific field or research field, but for that particular patent, view it with fresh eyes when you are drafting that application. View those terms with fresh eyes and provide the correct explanation to it. If it's a nucleotide, mention exactly what a nucleotide is, how much of it would be considered if it's a polynucleotide, how much of the sequences are there, what is it that you are concerned about, what is it that you're claiming, and what exactly is relevant to the present invention. So you provide definitions of key terms because they're very important in interpreting the scope of the claims, probably at a very late stage, some 2-3 years later during prosecution, or some 5-6 years later during litigation. You will not be able to change the definition of the key terms at that time. So although it is a tedious procedure, please ensure that you have defined all the key terms which you are using in your application preferably in an alphabetical manner so that it's easy for you to refer, but ensure that definitions are provided. Another main thing is that you use terms consistently throughout the specification and finally in the claims so that you avoid any ambiguity when interpreting. interpretation. If you have defined an X term to have a Y meaning, and this X term is known in the normal scientific literature to have some other Z meaning, when your patent is being validated or interpreted at a later stage, it will always be taken up from your definition which you have provided in the application, and not if you have not given so, then it is open for interpretation, and all that which is available in the public domain will be taken up, then considered, and then the scope of your claims would be judged. To avoid all such unnecessary hassles and to be clear and transparent, it is recommended that you maintain consistent terminology throughout the specification and in the claims. And for that reason, we say that the patentee or the applicant is their own lexicographer, because you define what the term means and you maintain it throughout the document. Coming over to the second part, that is the specific examples in the detailed description. Yes, well, as we have said, it fulfills the requirement for the best mode of practicing the invention, which has to be provided by the applicant, so that any person skilled in the art with ordinary skill in the art can make or work the invention. That is, he need not be a very experienced person or a very high skilled in the art with fanciful degrees. Usually it is considered that master's degree, a person with master's degree should be able to understand, comprehend, and work the invention. Now, besides enablement of the invention is also provided under these sections, and the technical advancement of the present invention that you're claiming, either it be against the prior art, if possible, closest prior art, what the inventor considers at that point of time. There could be comparative data, experiments. There could be experiments which show the efficacy of, if it's a composition claim, the efficacy of the composition against its individual components, or the process of preparing the product or the component composition. All such examples should be laid out in a very clear manner in the example section of the specification. The claims are the most important part of the specification because they have a legal connotation attached to it. It is only the claims section which will always be viewed when any litigation aspect is seen, whether it be opposition proceedings or revocation proceedings or any appeals or any other matters, right? So the importance of your claims is utmost, and the rest of the written description, everything is just the body of this core, which is the claims of your patent document. So your research or your initial studies from your prior art searches and your disclosures and your additional experiments, everything have now helped you define actually what an invention should be and what should be your essential elements of your invention in view of the existing art and in view of the exclusions which are there, so that you avoid all those traps. And then once all those essential elements of your invention has been defined, so if it's a product, you have defined what are how you would structurally define your product. If it's a composition, you would have defined what are the essential components of your composition. If it's a process, you may have probably defined what would be the process steps and the parameters which would be essential to define the invention. So once you have laid out or charted out all those inventions and the elements of your invention, you are now more set to draft your claims. So it is good to bear in mind that once a claim is drafted, it is always assessed in its entirety. So it's not that parts of a claim would be taken up and then assessed for any examination procedures or for any validity or infringement purposes, but it is the whole claim, which is often a single sentence, which is always a single sentence. And though it may have many parts, subparts, and all those things, it would always be a single sentence. So now that whole claim would always be taken up for assessing its scope or for determining its validity and infringement when, if in case it falls under litigation. So that is one of the main reasons that when you draft a claim, you ensure that there is one or more feature in the claim that distinguishes it from all the closest prior arts. Closest, close, anything. But there should be distinguishing features. And it is in the end when you actually defend your patent that you understand that these distinguishing features, they render your invention novel, they render your invention having an inventive step, and that is how it is also ensured that they overcome the anticipation and obviousness objections of the prior art. How exactly is a claim structured? A claim structured, as I say, it should be a single sentence. It also has two main parts, which is the preamble and the body. And it has a transitional word, which acts as a linking word. Usually the preamble is an introductory statement to the category or the subject of the claim. If it's a process, it says a process for XXX. If it's a product, it says a product for XXX, but usually because a product is often defined, it's specific. Here, compositions also fall under products. So here I have shown an herbal biscuit composition XXX. So it could be for, or it could directly go in, comprise, then it is followed by a transitional word. And then the body of the claim has the meat of your rights. So basically it describes the elements or the steps in case it's a process claim for the claimed subject matter or the entire scope. So it defines, if it's a process claim, it says the steps of the process or XXX, or it defines the components of the composition. And if it's a mere product, it just defines the structural form of the product. There are transitional words or phrases. Yes, it's mere English. But then when it is viewed under the lens of the legal eyes, it carries different interpretations and meanings, and that is where the scope of the claim is assessed. So comprising is one of the most often used word. It's considered as an open-ended language. And if you were to use the term comprising as a linking word, it means that it does encompass all the elements listed, which is being followed in the body of the claim, but then it does not exclude additional unnamed elements. So that means there could be additional elements, but I have not listed here. But in case my infringer adds one or two elements to my invention, which I have mentioned in the body, yes, of course, he would be considered as infringing. If I were to use the linking phrase consisting of, it is exactly opposite of comprising. It would be interpreted as a close-ended language, and it only consists of those elements which are being recited in the body of the claim. So in the previous scenario where there were additional elements being used by another X person, and if I did have consisting of in my claims, I would definitely not be able to sue him for any infringement purposes. There is a mid-term and intermediate term which is also used now, consisting essentially of. It is not considered as open-ended as comprising, and it is not so close-ended as consisting of, and essentially the term essentially does provide some restriction because it says that all the elements that have been listed in the body of the claim are essential. So the inventor has identified these terms as essential, and if someone were to add an additional element and show that it is not essential, then he would be infringing. But if it is essential, then obviously he would be moving out of my patent scope. What are the different aspects of your invention that could be claimed? So we have the product claims, we have the process claims, we have any apparatus and device claims. We also have product by process claims, and we have means plus function claims. So usually it is the product claims and the process claims which are often pursued for a single invention, because the product, which may encompass, supposing, modified or microorganism. You could also have another aspect of the product, which is a composition comprising the modified microorganism. And you could have a process wherein the process of preparing that modified microorganism are all linked together and they form a single invention. So these are the different aspects. Before you start, when you look at your invention and the different features of your invention and what all could be claimed, excuse me, what all could be claimed, what are the different aspects of the invention that you could claim, should clearly be charted out, and then the claim drafting should be started. We then have the claim scope. So the claim scope is the drafting of the claims, wherein we start from broad claims. Now, how do we even draft a broad claim? So the broad claim, the contours of your invention is been defined by now, for the reason that we understand what the distinguishing features are. We understand how far are the alternatives for those features you could at least bring under this territory, and you could consider it as broad. So now this is an art. Claim drafting is an art for the simple reason that you have to ensure that it is not too broad, that it also overlaps with other subject matter in the prior art. And it is also not too narrow that I just draw a claim which is only my invention and I don't have any suitable alternatives. And so a person in the same domain could easily infringe or work around this invention. So for these reasons, actually, it is best that the help of a professional is also taken in, and so that they can bring in their expertise, and you may also be able to understand when they send you the drafts of the document, of the patent document, you also understand as to what extent you want the protection or what else could be added up, and you could assist a person preparing the draft, or you yourself could envisage other features of your invention and try to accommodate in the claims. It's also important that one understands that you should have claims with different scope of protection so that all the aspects of the invention are covered. Like I mentioned before, like from a product, you move on to a composition, you move on to a process, you move on to, if necessary, you also move on to a product by process. Or if there are any specific devices that is to be looked into, that could also be considered. And as stated, please avoid any ambiguity in the claim language. It is best to keep it succinct, that is very clear and brief, and if required, there is no limit on the claims that could be drafted. The only limit being the economical aspect, because as per Indian patent law, only 10 claims are allowed with a specification of 30 pages. Anything which exceeds both the numbers, either the pages or the claims, they just draw an additional fee. But then that differs from invention to invention and inventor to inventor. But please take out the best benefit of it, rather than merely restricting your claim numbers just merely because of the additional fee purpose. If you feel that your invention merits protection for all the different aspects, please go ahead and invest in those claims. Now, drafting a claim is not merely stating or writing sentences, right? So now that we have seen that we put in we start with the broadest claim, that is the claim 1, and the broadest claim has all the essential elements of your invention, and these essential elements are also distinguished from the prior art, and yet they are not very specific. So basically we come over with a broad claim, and then this broad claim is a standalone claim because the first claim does not refer to any other claims, and so it is considered as an independent claim. Generally what happens is, the principle is that independent claims are drafted for different aspects of the invention or categories of the invention. And then there are dependent claims. Now, these claims actually refer to the previous claims which have been drafted, and then they bear more limitations to the claims. So supposing I have drafted claim 1 is a product or a composition comprising XXX components. I could probably draft a second claim wherein I say the composition as claimed in claim 1, wherein I make a back reference to the first claim, and then I define wherein the component X is of XXX or chosen from XXX or has a quantity of XXX or has a weight range of XXX in the composition. So the dependent claims actually, they further limit another claim or claims. They include all the limitations of the claim by incorporating the reference of the previous claim, and they are drafted to the extent desired for claiming more than one novel feature. So though the independent claim includes all the essential limitations, it is the dependent claims which also serve the purpose of defining that independent claim further. So in case the independent claim is actually shown, probably during examination, it is shown to fall under some prior art or has an overlapping feature, then the dependent claims and the features of the dependent claims certainly help us by helping amend the independent claim, wherein you could probably bring in that limitation which has been now given in a dependent claim has now brought forth to the independent claim, and so you have made your claim more restricted in view of the prior art, and yet all the essential features of your independent claim are present, and those are your we could say the arsenal, weapons in your arsenal to help you during the prosecution stage or the examination stage, and also probably help you out for defining the invention in a later stage when there is a validation, infringement activity or a litigation procedure. I have just got a example of a recent patent which has been granted under this sustainable environment, wherein and now it has been taken up by one of the leading international brands, wherein they have found a method of regeneration of cellulose. So as provided, it is a method claim, and it clearly states in the preamble what the subject matter is. And it has a very open-ended language as a transitional word, linking phrase, which is comprising. And then the body of the claim, though it is well defined, it is probably, this was defined during the stages of prosecution, because they had to bring in the essential parameters of the pH, the temperature, and the different steps, exposing, dispersing, adding, separating. And then if so, the first claim, the independent claim, very clearly defines all the features which act as distinguishing features against the closest prior art. Then claims 2 and 3, they did have 15 claims, which were all dependent, but I just put out here 2 claims, wherein you can understand that the definition, the defining features of the independent claim are further defined in claim 2. That is, the dispersing element has now come under claim 2, wherein it is being defined further. And the organic solvent, which has been first referred to in claim 1, is being more defined further in claim 3. So these are a few steps or a few tips on drafting biotech patents. With this, I would prefer to give a takeaway message that a patent application should usefully describe the invention and capture all details of the invention. Just ensure and be very cautious that whatever you disclose at the time of filing the application, you cannot make any further amendments for the technical subject matter. And do draft the specification in such a way that the patent examiner, when he reads your invention, should be in no doubt that this is one of the best inventions and should be in a mood to grant it. With that, I thank you all for this patient hearing and for giving me this opportunity to present this webinar for you. Salma, I think I've finished. I did exceed my time. I'm so sorry, but yeah, I couldn't make stop anywhere.
Thank you, ma'am. That was pretty much very informative in terms of law that was understood by our fraternity. Participants, if you have any queries, please unmute yourself and ask.
Hello, madam.
Hello.
Yeah, I have one query that patent filing and comprehensive drafting and diagram. You were talking that diagram is very important. So for simulation patent,
Yes, ma'am.
patent, how important it is for practical? I understand that diagram is very important, and because each part they will explain. But for simulation, how important it is?
Ma'am, exactly. So probably you could give the different simulation conditions and what you feel would be the end result, like how you are anticipating or whatever the program is like throwing out, and what would be the end results. Those could probably, if possible, you could give in the form of a flow chart also. That is not barred. If there are some, there was a patent application which we had done for a drug designing team, wherein they had done molecular docking studies. And there they had given us some numerous graphs which were present, sort of I don't remember exactly the term they used, but those were like CAD diagrams or something like that. And so they formed the pictures or the diagrams wherein they had fed the different parameters and the different conditions for such simulated experiments, and they gave us all those results. And that has now been filed in the application, but application is now under prosecution stage. So probably when we get it, I could explain it to you more. But if you do have any representative diagrams or anything visual, it often helps the examiner. That is the point.
And commercial value of some simulation patent, any? I think no, na?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay.
But I could check out probably with my colleagues. If you want, you can please mail me. Please feel free to mail us, anybody at Khurana or to me also. And we could definitely get back to you on this.
Okay. So can you tell me your email ID?
Yes, ma'am. It is there in the slide. It's also...
Chat box you write.
Yes, I could do that.
Ma'am, we have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to extend the term of patent protection?
In India, right now, no, we don't have such provision as in the US.
Priya@IIPRD. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
So they are the questions that we had, ma'am.
Oh, that's good. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, at the outset, on behalf of student, staff and management of the Oxford College of Engineering, I take this privilege to thank you from our end for gracing this occasion and then being the speaker for this FDP program.
No,
Thank you so
I am very happy and I'm very thankful for you to have considered me as a speaker to take part in this program. And really thank you to all the organizing team, AICTE and KSC SISTI, for having given me this opportunity. It was a pleasure, and I hope I did come across at least some points were useful. But thank you once again for this.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Yeah.